Ponniyin Selvan, Part 1, Fresh Floods, by Kalki, translated by Pavitra Srinivasan. Chapter 14, The Crocodile on the Banks. In those days, it was the custom among travellers from Kudandai to Tanjavur to journey along the Arisilaru or the banks of the river Ponni towards Thiruvayaru, from whence they turned south towards the capital. The reason for their choice was simple. It was on this route that ferries were plentiful to cross the rivers that cut across their path: Kudamurutti, Vettaru, Vennaru, and Vadavaru. Vandiyadevan was no different. The first thing he did when he left Kudandai was to strike out towards the Arisilaru. And it would be safe to say that everything that he had seen so far of Choranad's splendor far exceeded his expectations. It is quite natural, isn't it, to gasp in amazement at any vision of beauty when one first lays eyes on it? He cantered past lush green farms, flourishing with the rich scent of ginger and turmeric, sugarcane and plantain fields, groves of coconut and areca nut, gentle streams, burbling brooks, placid ponds and canals that seemed to follow one another's heels in quick succession. Hyacinths and lilies grew in profusion in the brooks, while the ponds practically overflowed with red and white lotuses, sengarunir, and nilotpalam flowers in a riot of color and scent. Flocks of storks flew into the sky, large off-white patches in contrast to the vibrant shades on earth. Narai birds stood on one red leg in the waters, lost in meditation. Smaller canals crisscrossing the fields gushed with water. The fields themselves, enriched by manure, leaves and shoots, were a deep earthy color, overflowing with mush. Farmers worked these lands from dawn to dusk, tilling the soil. Women bent towards the earth, engaged in planting, even as they raised their voice in glorious folk songs. Lush, fully grown sugar canes from the previous year were cut in the fields and transported to mills nearby, where they were promptly pressed for their sweet juice. Jaggery was boiled in their vicinity as well, and the scents mingled, assaulting the senses in tantalizing fashion. Tiny, charming huts, some with thatched roofs, others with tiles, peeped out from the midst of luxurious coconut groves. Their entrances, washed and paved with fresh cow dung, were in pristine condition, almost gleaming like mirrors. Some had paddy strewn across their front doors. Roosters often pecked the grains, crowed a lusty cuckoo before prancing away. Children, supposed to be guarding the grains, barely glanced at them. They went on playing with shells or the fascinating game of pallanguri. Those roosters can't possibly eat all that much, seemed to be their stance, and the thieving birds were largely ignored. Fragrant smoke billowed above the huts, the aroma of boiling rice, frying kambu grain, and roasted meat wafted around them. Vandiyadevan's mouth fairly watered. Most warriors of those times were carnivores. The young man was no different. Smithies dotted the roadside at regular intervals. Glowing coals burnt fiercely within. Danar, danar. There, that was the din of iron being forged, along with farming implements such as plows, spades, and crowbars, were littered swords, shields, bows, and spears in large heaps. Farmers and soldiers alike jostled with each other, eager to claim their implement of choice. The tiniest of villages boasted temples that matched their stature. They resounded with the auspicious sounds of clanging semakalams, the beats of the nagara, sacred chants, and sweet Tevaram hymns. Local deities such as Mariamman were placed on soft cushions and paraded while priests danced in the procession, often carrying colorful karagams on their heads or beating tiny percussion instruments known as udukkai, a sign of their devotion. Some received liberal offerings of paddy as well. Cows ambled through the villages, the bells around their necks tinkling musically, while boys drove them towards pasture, some even playing accompaniment on their flutes. Farmers mopped sweating faces as they worked and rested in the cool shade of trees during intervals. These were the times they enjoyed ram fights, setting the horned animals against each other and egging them on. Peahens shrieked lustily from their perches atop huts. Peacocks, fascinated by their calls, dragged their magnificent plumage with difficulty and swung through the air, settling down among them. Beautiful doves stalked here and there, twisting their necks to look about them. As for the parrots and nightingales, locked away in cages, ah, those pitiful creatures sang sorrowful songs from within their prisons. Yes, there was plenty to see. Vandiyadevan drank in the sights, clip-clopping slowly on his horse, his mind engaged in capturing and storing away as much as he could. But even as he tried to lose himself in the outside world, he was aware, deep down in his subconscious mind, of a picture. The picture of a beautiful young woman, shrouded in the mists of his memory. Ah, why couldn't she have parted her coral lips and addressed a few words to him? Surely that would have been no loss to her. Who could have she been? No matter, obviously someone not very conversant with good manners. Else she'd have paid some attention to him, wouldn't she? Was he, Vandiyadevan, such an insignificant specimen that she must ignore him so completely? And that wily astrologer hadn't breathed a word about her identity. Clever, cunning old man, diverting his attention so well to other concerns. How perceptive he had been, how vast his experience of the world. To tell the truth, he's managed to escape saying anything of worth. His predictions about royal affairs were vague in the extreme, filled with caution. The things he did reveal were already public knowledge. Still, he had mentioned that Vandiyadevan's stars were on the rise, hadn't he? For that alone he deserved some good fortune. Long live the Kudandai astrologer. Vandiyadevan travelled thus, his mind occupied with everything he had heard and seen so far. Sometimes the outside world caught his attention and he gave his mind to it as well, in brief intervals. Eventually he reached his destination, the Arisilar. In the distance he heard a few sounds and stopped. Feminine laughter and the tinkling of bangles. Vandiyadevan stared at the banks, intrigued, but the dense foliage screened the ladies effectively. The urge to seek them out struck him, and he trotted along the riverside, peering through the trees, trying to find where they might be. Abruptly he heard a scream. "Ayyo, ayyo, a crocodile! Help, please!" Instantly, Vandiyadevan spurred his horse towards the frightened voice. There, he could see a few women through a gap in the trees. Terror painted their faces vividly. Ah, what a surprise! 2 of them were the young women he had seen at the astrologer's home. It took only a few moments for Vandiyadevan to take all this in, but this was not the only thing he saw. Underneath a large tree, clothed in deep shadows, lay a large crocodile, half on land and half in water, almost part of an enormous tree's thick roots. Its mouth gaped wide, teeth jagged and sharp. Vandiyadevan had seen one such terrifying reptile himself in the Kollidam. He had also heard what frightening predators they were. This one particularly brought his worst fears to the surface and set his nerves jangling with tension. Not only did it seem ready for a human feast, it was very near the laughing young women as well, mouth open, wide, as if to chomp upon them. All it had to do was pounce forward, and they would be torn to pieces. The banks were thick with clusters of trees. There was really no way for the women to break through and escape. His heart may have been murky with confused feelings, but Vandiyadevan's resolve did not falter an instant. Neither did he spend time pondering his course of action. He hefted his trusty spear, took aim and threw it. The weapon cleaved through the air and struck the crocodile, sure and true, penetrating its thick skin and plunging in a little. At once Vandiyadevan sprang forward with his sword, fully intending to rip it apart, once and for all. But why were these women laughing, just like before? Vandiyadevan could barely stomach it. Why were they giggling? He stopped short, suddenly unsure. Not a vestige of fear was on the faces of these women around him. They looked amused, eyes gleaming with mirth. Certainly they did not seem to be the young ladies who had shrieked with terror just a few moments ago. One of them, the majestic young woman he had seen at the astrologer's home, spoke in a melodious voice. "Girls, Quiet, all of you, laughing at such a moment. Her stern words echoed vaguely in Vandiyadevan's ears as though in a dream. Sword still held aloft, he directed his attention to the crocodile. Then he stared hard at the chuckling women. A suspicion reared up its head, a suspicion that froze him, mind and body curling in acute embarrassment. The young woman walked forward again and stood opposite the crocodile, as though guarding it. Many thanks to you, Ayya, but there's no need to trouble yourself. End of chapter. I hope you guys enjoyed listening. Please like, comment, and share this video, and subscribe for upcoming chapters. Thank you.